Today's video is about graved salmon or Gravlax, and that's actually not a German recipe. It's more from the North European part of Scandinavia, like Finland, Sweden, Norway and Denmark. But since Germany borders to Denmark in the north, we of course do this recipe too, and by the end of this video you will be able to save a lot of money by making your own graved salmon and also make 3 different sauces that go perfectly with it. First you have to make the graved salmon, and you have to do this at least 48 hours before you want to serve it because it needs this time to cure. So I made this 2 days ago and I'll show you now how I did that. So here's what you need. You need salmon, dill, some sugar and some salt. Well, that's all you need. So you start by washing the salmon and tapping it dry with some kitchen paper. I am removing this flat side part because that is tasting a little bit like tran, a little bit oily. And it's also a little bit too flat to be in the curing situation. So I put this away. And then you check for some fish bone. So you go with your fingers over the fish and check if there's anything that is hard that you feel like is a fish bone. And if you find one, you can use tweezers to slowly pull them out. And make sure you do that slowly so they don't break and will be difficult to be found. So in my case, I only have some fish bones here at the very end, and I remove them. And then my fish is almost ready, and I set the salmon aside. So now I'm chopping the dill, and I can chop it with the stems and everything because this is just for seasoning. It will be removed later. Now I mix the salt and the sugar. And then I'm adding the dill. I mix it all together and then it looks like this. Now I need a large pan or container that's large enough to hold the salmon, and I put some of this curing mix on the bottom of this pan and then the salmon on top of it, and I put the cut open side on the bottom and the scaled side is facing me. And I'm also putting some of the curing mix on top. Now I want to pressure it a little bit, so I put another smaller container on top, and then you put something heavy on top, so like a can, or in my case I just use some of my gym weights. Now this has to go into the fridge for 48 hours. Here is now the salmon after 48 hours. Let me remove the weights and also the second container. So here you can see now that the salmon has lost some water. And let me turn this around, and if I touch this I can feel that it's a lot firmer than it was before. It's not totally firm, but it's very different from when I put it in there, where I would not have been able to cut it into thin slices. So what I have to do now is I remove this as good as I can. Personally, I don't mind if there is still a little bit of the dill on it. Some people don't like it. In that case, you can use a tough brush and just brush it off as good as possible. You should definitely not wash it with water. All right. So now when it comes to cutting the graved salmon, the question is what direction. So I cut it into the direction of the tail of the fish, so of the shorter side, and I go in a very shallow angle. And the first couple of slices are of course always a little bit small, but then they are getting larger and larger. So now you might wonder where the name graved salmon comes from, or Gravlax. We call it Lachs in Germany too, just as the Scandinavian call it. And so the way it was made originally was that the fresh caught fish was buried in the sand of the beach or on the soil, and with the salt and sugar and some dill, and then it was kept there for days, sometimes weeks or even months, and it was fermenting there and also curing there. This made it very lasting long, so they could eat it in the winter or take it on long ship journeys. So it was really a grave for the salmon to be put into the soil. So when do we Germans eat salmon? So this is definitely something that's always there if you have a brunch. We also eat it with some potato pancakes. It's also something we have at the buffet of parties like New Year's Eve. So lots of situations where we like this. And of course, I think you call it canapes. When we make a party, we also have sometimes these little slices of baguette bread or small bread slices, and these are usually also with some of the salmon. And usually when I buy salmon, it's quite expensive, and I get, for the same money like making it myself, I get only half of the amount of the fish, which I feel is frustrating. And that's why I prefer to make it myself, so I have more control about how much I get and how much I pay. So let's try a little bit of it. Absolutely delicious. This is good. Now this probably goes without saying, but I'm saying it anyway. You of course have to work very clean. This is still a raw fish. It's cured, that makes it a little less likely to go bad. You will be able to keep this in the fridge for about a week without getting it spoiled. But since we are not digging this in the soil anymore, it's not fermenting, so it's just cured. While the Scandinavians let it ferment a little bit, we don't do that anymore. I think they don't either. So now that this is done, I'm gonna wash my hands now, and then I'll show you 3 different sauces that we serve with graved salmon. So the first sauce that I want to show you is a simple dill sauce that we make. For that you need the tips of the dill, this time not the stems, just these finer tips. And you chop these finely. Then I'm adding 4 tablespoons of sugar. Then also I need some mustard, and here I have some extra spicy, extra hot mustard that I made myself. I put it into an old German mustard jar, but this is homemade, and if you want to know how to make this kind of a very spicy mustard, here's a recipe for that. You will also find a link to this recipe in the description of this video in the YouTube app and also on the blog post. So 3 of these very spicy mustard things. Let me first finish this one. Then 3 tablespoons of a mild mustard, and I still have some honey mustard from last week's recipe for the mustard sauce. So I'm using what I have, but if you have just a mild mustard, then that's the one that you use. Next I'm using 3 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. And 5 tablespoons of sunflower oil. So I mix this all together. Actually, you should drizzle the sunflower oil slowly into this mixture, but this works too. Now for the second sauce, I again use some dill tips that I'm again chopping very finely. And then this goes into a bowl again. So this is the honey mustard sauce, while the first one was the dill sauce. And here I'm using 6 tablespoons of honey. Then I'm using 3 tablespoons of old style mustard. This is a stone ground mustard. It's German brand actually, but it doesn't have to be. It was just the cheapest I could get. Okay, is it really a German one? Original stone ground? I'm not sure. Let me see. Hillsborough. No, it's not made in Germany. It's actually from Oregon. Okay, I'll take it anyway. Then I'm adding some fresh ground pepper and a little bit of lemon juice. Not too much. Okay, and now I'm using a little bit of the liquid that I have from the graved salmon. That's why I kept it. Very delicious. I want a little more of the acid though. Perfect. Let's have it with a little bit of the Lachs. Very good. It tastes quite different from the first sauce, although the ingredients are very similar. I want it to be a little more fishy. That's what I wanted. Wonderful. So now there are probably some people who say, I don't like dill, and I get it. A lot of people don't like dill. No problem. I have one more recipe of how I most like my salmon, and that is with the horseradish cream sauce. And that is something that I know from my childhood mostly. We had very fresh radish, so horseradish that we were grating freshly, which has a very strong taste and very strong smell too. It's delicious. I don't get a fresh one here, I wouldn't know where to buy it, but I got a little bit of the store-bought one, and I will mix it with some whipped cream. I'll show you how I do this. I whipped up a little bit of heavy cream. I don't think I have to show you how to do that. So now I'm using this knot, and you can see it's not too stiff. I let it a little bit soft. And you can see it, so it's very nice. And now I'm adding a little bit of some store-bought cream horseradish that already has some cream, but trust me, if you eat it like that, it's a little bit too spicy for my taste, and so we usually add it to fresh whipped cream. Let me see if that was enough. Need some more. Not too much. And I'm adding a pinch of sugar. Yeah. You can also add a little bit of salt if you want. I like it a little bit sweet, but not too much. And this, again, tastes fantastic. Yeah, so this is the third thing we use with the graved Lachs, graved salmon, Gravlax. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't yet. Watch some more of my videos. There are lots of recipes for homemade food and basic German recipes. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next video.